Picture this. You're standing in the shadow of a towering limestone pyramid at Chichen Itza, the humid air thick with copal incense, and something far more sinister. The year is 900 AD, and you're witnessing a ceremony that would make even the most hardened archaeologists' blood run cold. Young captives, their bodies painted with sacred blue pigment, are being prepared for rituals that blur the line between divine worship and sexual horror. The priests chant in ancient Maya as obsidian blades glint in the torchlight, and you realize that everything you thought you knew about this sophisticated civilization was sanitized for textbooks. This isn't the story of Maya astronomy or their mathematical achievements. This is the dark underbelly of one of history's most advanced civilizations, where sexual practices were woven into religious doctrine in ways that would shock modern sensibilities, where fertility rituals demanded human sacrifice, where gods required sexual offerings of blood and pain, and where the most intimate acts became instruments of cosmic terror. Before we descend into these forgotten chambers of Maya sexuality, if you're fascinated by the hidden truths that history books won't tell you, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content that explores the darker corners of human civilization. And please, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It amazes me that we're uncovering these ancient secrets together from every corner of the globe, connected by our shared fascination with the mysteries our ancestors left behind. The Maya weren't just master builders and astronomers. They were architects of sexual rituals so extreme, so intertwined with violence and divine worship, that modern scholars have spent decades trying to understand how a civilization capable of such mathematical precision could create practices that seem designed to maximize human suffering. These weren't random acts of cruelty. They were carefully orchestrated ceremonies where sexuality became a weapon of the gods, where pleasure and pain merged into religious ecstasy, and where the human body became a canvas for cosmic horror. Let me take you into the sacred cenotes, those natural wells that the Maya believed were gateways to the underworld, where young women were thrown not just as sacrifices, but as sexual offerings to water deities who demanded virgin blood. Into the ball courts, where the losers faced more than death, where sexual mutilation was part of the ritual execution that followed every game. Into the palace chambers, where Maya rulers engaged in bloodletting rituals so sexually charged and physically extreme that they would induce visions of gods and demons. The Maya understanding of sexuality was inseparable from their concept of cosmic balance. They believed that sexual energy was a force that could literally maintain the universe, but only when properly channeled through pain, blood, and sacrifice. Their creation myths spoke of gods who masturbated the world into existence, who engaged in sexual acts so violent they shattered mountains and created rivers from divine semen mixed with blood. In Maya cosmology, the human body wasn't just flesh and bone, it was a microcosm of the universe itself, where sexual organs corresponded to sacred directions, where bodily fluids carried divine power, and where the act of procreation required the intervention of supernatural forces that demanded increasingly extreme offerings. Maya priests developed elaborate theories about sexual compatibility based not on personal preference, but on calendar calculations that determined which combinations of sexual partners would please specific deities. The Maya calendar wasn't just for tracking time, it was a sexual instruction manual that dictated when couples could engage in intercourse, which positions were acceptable on specific days, and how sexual energy could be harvested for religious purposes. Maya nobles consulted priest astronomers before every intimate encounter, learning whether their sexual activity would strengthen or weaken the cosmic order. Maya fertility rituals began long before conception. Young women underwent months of preparation that included dietary restrictions, bloodletting ceremonies, and sexual conditioning designed to make them suitable vessels for divine intervention. They were taught to endure pain as a form of sexual pleasure, to associate physical suffering with spiritual ecstasy, and to view their bodies as temporary housing for supernatural forces. The preparation process involved gradual mutilation disguised as beautification. Maya women had their teeth filed into points and inlaid with jade, not just for aesthetics, but because the pain of the procedure was believed to increase sexual sensitivity. They underwent cranial modification that literally reshaped their skulls, creating pressure that supposedly enhanced sexual visions and divine communication during intercourse. Maya marriage ceremonies included blood rituals where both partners would pierce their genitals with stingray spines, mixing their blood with copal incense, while priests chanted invocations to fertility gods. The wedding night wasn't a private affair, but a public ceremony where the community gathered to witness the couple's sexual union, ensuring that proper rituals were followed and that the gods received their due offerings of pain and pleasure. But Maya sexuality reached its most horrifying extremes in their fertility cults, secret societies that existed parallel to official religious institutions. These cults practiced sexual rituals so extreme that even Maya priests feared them, ceremonies that required participants to push their bodies beyond normal human limits in pursuit of divine sexual ecstasy. The cult of Ixchel, the Maya goddess of sexuality and childbirth, demanded that followers engage in sexual practices designed to simulate the goddess's own traumatic experiences. According to Maya mythology, Ixchel was repeatedly raped by various gods, and her worshippers believed they could channel her power by reenacting these divine assaults. Women would volunteer to be sexually brutalized in elaborate ceremonies, while men competed for the honor of representing the rapist gods. These weren't random acts of violence disguised as religion. They were carefully choreographed performances with specific rules, procedures, and expected outcomes. Participants underwent months of training to learn the proper techniques, the correct prayers, and the precise timing required to transform sexual assault into religious communion. Maya priests developed detailed manuals describing how to conduct these rituals without killing the participants. Though death was always considered a possibility and sometimes a desired outcome, they understood human anatomy with surgical precision, knowing exactly how much damage the human body could endure while maintaining consciousness and sexual responsiveness. The cult ceremonies took place in underground chambers carved into the limestone bedrock, spaces designed to amplify sound so that the participants' screams would resonate through the earth and reach the underworld deities. These chambers were decorated with sexually explicit murals that depicted not just human intercourse, but sexual acts between humans and supernatural beings, humans and animals, and humans and deceased ancestors. Maya's sexual magic extended beyond the living world into their elaborate funeral rites, where the deceased were prepared for sexual encounters in the afterlife through practices that would horrify modern morticians. The dead were positioned in sexually suggestive poses, their bodies modified with artificial phalluses or vaginal inserts made from jade and obsidian, and buried with collections of sexual implements designed for use in the underworld. The Maya believed that sexual energy didn't die with the body, but continued in the afterlife, where the deceased would need to engage in sexual acts with gods and demons to maintain their spiritual existence. They developed an entire industry around preparing corpses for posthumous sexual activity, including the creation of artificial sexual organs for bodies too damaged by disease or violence to maintain their natural genitalia. Maya necrophilia wasn't considered taboo, but rather a necessary service performed by specialized priests who would engage in sexual acts with carefully prepared corpses to activate their spiritual sexual energy before burial. These priests underwent years of training to learn the proper techniques for posthumous sexual activation, including the use of drugs and magical implements to maintain sexual arousal while working with decomposing bodies. The complexity of Maya sexual practices extended into their understanding of gender and sexual identity in ways that challenged every assumption about ancient sexuality. The Maya recognized multiple genders beyond male and female, creating elaborate sexual categories that determined not just social status, but religious obligations and cosmic responsibilities. Maya gender categories included the Nahuali, individuals who were believed to possess both male and female sexual essences and could transform between genders during specific rituals. These gender-fluid individuals weren't marginalized, but rather elevated to positions of extreme religious importance, serving as sexual bridges between the mortal and divine realms. The Nahuali underwent initiation ceremonies that involved surgical modification of their genitalia using obsidian blades and cactus spines. The procedures weren't designed to create functional sexual organs of the opposite gender, but rather to create hybrid sexual anatomy that could channel both masculine and feminine divine energies during religious ceremonies. Maya priests believed that the Nahuali's modified genitalia could receive sexual energy from gods of both genders simultaneously, making them living conduits for divine sexual power. During major fertility festivals, the Nahuali would engage in marathon sexual rituals that lasted for days, serving multiple partners while maintaining states of drug-induced sexual ecstasy that supposedly allowed them to communicate directly with fertility deities. The surgical modifications required for Nahuali transformation were performed without anesthesia as part of the spiritual conditioning process. Candidates were expected to achieve sexual arousal during the cutting procedures, demonstrating their ability to transform pain into pleasure and proving their worthiness to serve as divine sexual vessels. Maya medical knowledge of sexual anatomy was frighteningly advanced, developed through centuries of ritual modification and sexual experimentation conducted in the name of religious devotion. Maya physicians understood nerve pathways and blood flow with precision that wouldn't be matched in Western medicine for over 1,000 years. But they used this knowledge to create sexual experiences that pushed human physiology to its absolute limits. The Maya developed sophisticated techniques for extending sexual endurance through combinations of herbal drugs, physical conditioning, and psychological manipulation. Male priests underwent training programs that included gradual genital mutilation, designed to reduce sexual sensitivity, while maintaining function, allowing them to perform in marathon ritual sessions without reaching climax until the ceremonies required it. Female priestesses underwent even more extreme conditioning that included the insertion of jade and obsidian implements into their vaginas, objects that remained permanently implanted to create constant sexual stimulation while preventing normal sexual satisfaction. These implements were carved with intricate designs that corresponded to specific deities, turning the women's bodies into living temples dedicated to particular gods. The implanted objects weren't just religious symbols, but functional sexual instruments designed to enhance the women's ability to achieve the altered states of consciousness that Maya religion demanded. The constant stimulation created a baseline state of sexual arousal that could be amplified through additional rituals, drugs, and physical manipulation during ceremonies. Maya sexual ceremonies often involved the use of psychoactive substances that intensified physical sensations while inducing hallucinations of divine sexual encounters. Participants would consume preparations made from psilocybin mushrooms, morning glory seeds, and various toxic plants that created experiences where the boundaries between physical and spiritual sexuality dissolved completely. Under the influence of these drugs, Maya worshippers reported sexual encounters with gods, ancestors, and supernatural beings that felt more real than physical intercourse with human partners. These hallucinogenic sexual experiences were considered the ultimate form of religious communion, direct, intimate contact with the divine realm that transcended normal human sexuality. The drug-induced sexual visions followed predictable patterns that suggest the Maya had developed sophisticated understanding of how psychoactive substances interact with sexual arousal. Participants reported encounters with specific types of supernatural beings, depending on the drugs used, the setting of the ceremony, and their own sexual conditioning. Maya priests carefully controlled these experiences through environmental manipulation, sexual stimulation, and psychological suggestion that guided participants towards specific types of divine sexual encounters. The priests served as sexual choreographers, orchestrating group experiences where multiple participants would simultaneously achieve drug-induced sexual communion with the same supernatural entities. These group sexual ceremonies could involve hundreds of participants engaging in synchronized sexual activities while under the influence of powerful hallucinogens. The Maya believed that coordinated sexual energy from large groups could literally reshape reality, opening portals to the divine realm and allowing gods to physically manifest in the human world. The logistical challenges of organizing these massive sexual rituals required sophisticated planning and preparation. Maya priests spent months calculating the optimal timing based on astronomical events, preparing the necessary drugs and sexual implements, and conditioning participants for the extreme physical and psychological demands of the ceremonies. Maya sexual architecture included specialized buildings designed specifically for these group rituals, structures with acoustic properties that amplified sexual sounds, and visual elements that enhanced drug-induced hallucinations. These buildings were constructed according to precise mathematical principles that supposedly channeled divine sexual energy and focused it towards specific religious objectives. The most extreme Maya sexual rituals took place in natural caves that had been modified with carved sexual imagery and artificial chambers designed to create specific acoustic and visual effects. These underground temples were considered direct connections to the sexual organs of the earth goddess, spaces where human sexual activity could directly influence agricultural fertility and cosmic stability. Maya cave rituals often involved sexual acts performed in complete darkness, with participants relying on touch and sound to navigate complex sexual choreographies involving multiple partners and supernatural entities they believed were present but invisible. The sensory deprivation intensified the psychological impact of the drugs and sexual stimulation, creating experiences that participants described as more intense than anything possible in normal consciousness. The darkness also concealed the identities of participants, allowing Maya nobles and commoners to engage in sexual acts that would be impossible in the rigidly stratified Maya society. These cave ceremonies created temporary sexual democracies, where social status was suspended, and sexual compatibility became the only measure of participation. Maya sexual practices reached their most horrifying extremes in their human sacrifice rituals, where sexuality and death merged into ceremonies that were designed to create the ultimate offering to their bloodthirsty gods. Victims weren't simply killed, but were subjected to elaborate sexual tortures that transformed their deaths into cosmic sexual acts between humanity and the divine realm. As we emerge from the shadows of those ancient limestone pyramids, our minds reeling from the horrors we've witnessed, we're confronted with a disturbing truth about human nature itself. The Maya weren't monsters or aliens from another world. They were humans just like us, capable of extraordinary intellectual achievement and unimaginable cruelty, often within the same breath. Their mathematical precision and astronomical knowledge coexisted with sexual practices so extreme they challenge our understanding of what civilization actually means. These weren't the actions of a primitive society stumbling through darkness, but the calculated decisions of one of history's most sophisticated cultures. The Maya developed complex theological justifications for their sexual horrors, created detailed medical knowledge to sustain them, and built architectural marvels to house them. They turned human sexuality into a cosmic weapon, transforming the most intimate aspects of human experience into instruments of divine terror. The disturbing reality is that the Maya sexual practices we've explored today weren't aberrations or exceptions. They were the logical extensions of a worldview that saw human bodies as expendable resources in humanity's relationship with supernatural forces. Every scream echoing through those underground chambers, every drop of blood spilled on temple altars, every life destroyed in pursuit of divine sexual communion was justified by a religious system that demanded nothing less than total human sacrifice. What makes the Maya story so chilling isn't just the extremity of their practices, but how seamlessly they integrated sexual horror into every aspect of their civilization. From birth to death, from marriage to warfare, from agriculture to astronomy, sexuality became the thread that wove together a culture built on cosmic terror. The Maya didn't separate the sacred from the sexual, the divine from the depraved, the brilliant from the brutal. They created a world where all these elements merged into something that defies our modern categories of understanding. Perhaps most disturbing of all is the realization that these practices weren't imposed by tyrants or madmen, but were embraced by entire populations who genuinely believed they were necessary for cosmic survival. The Maya who participated in these rituals weren't victims of oppression, but willing participants in a religious system that promised divine communion through sexual suffering. They chose horror because they believed it was the price of maintaining universal order. Today's exploration into Maya sexuality forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the relationship between civilization and cruelty, between intellectual achievement and moral horror. The same minds that calculated celestial movements with breathtaking precision also designed sexual tortures that would make modern sadists recoil in disgust. The same hands that carved mathematical equations into stone monuments also wielded obsidian blades in sexual rituals designed to maximize human agony. The Maya remind us that human intelligence can be turned toward any purpose, that sophisticated knowledge can serve the darkest impulses, and that the capacity for both creation and destruction lies within every civilization, including our own. Their sexual practices weren't the product of ignorance, but of a different kind of knowledge, a religious understanding that saw cosmic truth in human suffering and divine love in sexual horror. As we stand once again in the shadow of those towering pyramids, the copal incense now silent, the screams echoing only in our imaginations, we're left with the haunting recognition that the Maya sexual practices we've explored today weren't ancient history, but windows into the depths of human possibility. The same species that created mathematical beauty also created sexual horror, and both emerged from the same brilliant, terrible, utterly human minds. The Maya civilization collapsed over 1,000 years ago, their cities swallowed by jungle, their sexual rituals silenced by time. But the questions they raise about human nature, about the relationship between knowledge and cruelty, about the price of cosmic communion, echo through the centuries into our own age. We may have abandoned their specific practices, but we haven't escaped the fundamental human impulses that created them.